Hello and welcome to Global Eye from the BBC World Service, where we bring you some of the very best of our global investigative journalism and reportage. I'm Anna Foster from the Today programme, and this week we're in Iraq, a country that I've reported from many times over the last 2 decades. In the last few years, Iraq has seen relative calm, but it's endured terror, chaos and bloodshed both before and after the invasion by American and British troops in 2003. A battle against the Islamic State terror group, who took over a swathe of the country in 2014, only made things harder.
Iraqis have just been to the polls in the first election since the political crisis in 2021.
Over the next half hour, I'll be looking at just how much the ghosts of Iraq's violent past still haunt its political present.
We'll bring you an eye investigation that sheds light on one of the darkest chapters of America's occupation of Iraq. With eyewitness testimony and never-before-shown footage, we reconstruct the anatomy of a war crime, what really happened in Haditha on November the 19th, 2005. And as Iraq continues to struggle with chronic power shortages and soaring temperatures, we'll meet people finding innovative ways to adapt, transforming their lives and providing security for their families.
Life here in Iraq today bears little resemblance to the country that I first came to back in the late noughties, when I joined British forces to report on the troop surge by them and the Americans to try to crack down on the country's increasingly violent insurgency. But now here in Baghdad, the sound of gunfire and roadside bombs has given way to the noise of construction. There are skyscrapers and luxury apartments being built. And look, the markets here are always busy. The restaurants are packed with people who travel from miles around. And although the city still isn't a completely safe place to be, it has come a long way from the dark days of President Saddam Hussein and the chaos that followed his downfall. His dictatorship was defined by rigid control and widespread repression. And life here has changed significantly now, but the path to this point has been fraught with turmoil and peril.
Over the years, Iraq has transitioned from a country of sectarian violence and instability into a fragile democracy, with power shared uneasily across ethnic and sectarian groups. It's something we see in various countries across the Middle East, and here that delicate arrangement has brought some stability. But it's also stifled growth and development, and for many Iraqis, it's something that has held the country back.
I was most recently here in Baghdad in 2021, covering the political crisis that was triggered by the last set of elections. The mood was volatile, voter turnout was low. It was a real sign of the widespread public discontent over corruption and the slow pace of reform. And despite protesting for change, young people in particular just didn't believe that it was about to happen. Then hundreds of Iranian-backed militia members tried to storm the heavily fortified Green Zone, which holds the Iraqi parliament. It all looked like any kind of progress would be hard to achieve. But after lengthy talks, the Shia politician Mohammed Shia al-Sudani emerged as the compromise candidate that every faction could at least live with. And another fragile political settlement was born.
Al-Sudani proved to be a relatively popular leader, bringing stability to the country domestically and successfully walking the tightrope of maintaining Iraq's crucial relationships with the US and with Iran. His political coalition won the most seats in last week's election, and he looks set to form the next government. The incoming administration will have a full inbox, reviving an economy that has started to falter and dealing with rampant official corruption. And it will have to handle America's continued military presence in the country. The last remaining US troops in Iraq were meant to be leaving this year, but that timetable has now slipped, leaving visible reminders of the war in a country that is still scarred by its past.
America's presence here still casts a long shadow. And more than 20 years after the invasion, one incident in particular has left enduring questions about the conduct of some American troops and about their rules of engagement. On the 19th of November 2005, US Marines killed 24 civilians in the Iraqi town of Haditha, northwest of Baghdad. Many of them were women and children. The brutal events of that day led to the longest and most expensive war crimes investigation in US military history. 6 Marines were implicated in the killings. 1 stood trial, but none served any time in prison. Now, after a forensic investigation over 3 years, BBC Eye can reveal never-before-seen evidence which implicates 2 Marines who were never prosecuted for the deaths of the innocent civilians in Haditha. Here's their exclusive report.
Saturday, November 19, 2005, started off as a normal day for 1st Squad, 3rd Platoon Kilo Company in Haditha, Iraq. I changed the normal route of north on River Road and west on Haditha Road. This is one decision I will always regret. An explosion louder than anything I've ever heard rocked the entire convoy. I advised the team something like shoot first and ask questions later.
يعني ندق باب البيت فجأة ذهب والدي ليفتح الباب صارت الإطلاقات.
Iraqis claim the Marines went on a rampage in the town of Haditha after one of their own men was killed in a roadside bomb attack.
There had never been a case on this scale that involved the death of 24 Iraqi civilians.
I'm trying to remember what happened.
كنت أعيش طفولة سعيدة مع عائلتي، مع أخواتي وأخواني ومع الجيران، أطفال أصحابي والأصدقاء بالمدرسة. أكيد هاي الذكريات كلها ما تنسي. هاي الغرفة اللي قتل بها العائلة كاملة، وأنا الناجية الوحيدة من العائلة. على الرغم من القساوة والشي صار، لازم تكون ذكراهم موجودة دائما بالبال.
Time 12:24, photography starting on house 4. Checking for defects. We're going to be here longer than we thought. I ended up getting sent to Haditha to do a forensic analysis. We ended up having 4 sites where there were killings that were brought into question. The Marine version of events is there was an improvised explosive device that was triggered. It took out the last vehicle in their convoy. The very lead of the convoy was pulled up almost adjacent to a vehicle that had several Iraqi males in it. The Marines said there were some suspicious things about the vehicle. They shot and killed the men from the car. That became our first scene as roadside. They also reported receiving gunfire. There was a house in that direction. As they moved through the house to secure it, that resulted in the death of 3 adult males, a mother, a child, and others. They saw who they thought it was the gunman leave through the back, so they followed into house 2. House 2 is where we end up with the father being shot by the front door, and then the horrific scene in the back bedroom where the mother and the children are shot on the bed. So what we're looking at the end of the day is that there were 24 deaths at the hands of the Marines in Haditha.
Staff Sergeant Frank Wuterich will face a military trial for leading a Marine squad that killed 24 Iraqi men, women, and children. Wuterich was one of 8 Marines originally charged with murder.
Sometime early in 2006, I got a phone call from someone who was seeking an attorney for Staff Sergeant Wuterich. I had represented other soldiers and Marines accused of war crimes, but once you see the photographs and read the forensic analysis, anyone who was presented with that information could never believe that these casualties were unintended.
What happened in here that allowed 2 women and 5 children to be identified as a threat, as a target, and to be Mitigated would be the polite word. I'll use the word executed.
It's absolutely certain he either heard and or saw you shooting.
I do not, honest to God, remember firing in house 1 or 2. I know I threw a grenade in house 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you don't remember shooting in the houses at all?
I don't.
We have statements from the Marines, and in house 2, we have 2 different versions of events.
The series called back to order. They call you first witness.
Also, Mendoza.
Mendoza gives a very elaborate statement of what happens.
I see somebody trying to open the door and adult male. I open fire, the male went down.
They entered the house. We have a Mendoza saying he was going down the hall.
When I open the door, first thing I see is women and kids laying down the bed, and there's another kid that hiding in the other side of the bed. I closed the door and started talking to his commentator. I told him that there were just women and kids inside the room. He says, well, shoot them. Okay. I said, they're just women and kids. So I started walking back again to my position. While I was walking, I can hear him opening the door, sir. I hear a loud noise coming from inside the house, sir.
Mendoza clearly states that the one that was still in the hall is Tatum. So there's a lot of implication that Tatum is the one doing the shooting. In Tatum's statement, he's following Wuterich into the house.
He's muzzled up, ready to engage any individual coming out of the 2 doors in front of us, sir. He proceeded front through door 2, and I pitched and went into door 1, sir. Right about at that same time, and the room that's after Wuterich entered, I hear M16 firing. I immediately came in and started engaging targets. I saw 4 to 5 silhouettes, big, small.
So certainly with Tatum, he places himself in the room, firing across the head of the bed. Then we have Wuterich, and he never makes a statement to NCIS, but he makes some early statements. Very simple. We were there, we cleared the house, we left. Based on Tatum's statement, we placed Wuterich in that room doing that shooting.
Frank seemed to have the worst memory about the events in House 2. While he remembered them making entry to the house, he couldn't tell us basically anything that happened after that. So in 2008, Frank went back to Haditha. This seemed like perhaps the only way we could get Frank to remember.
So let's walk through. What are you thinking, Frank?
I'm trying to remember what happened.
But I really can't remember.
أكيد يكذبون، لازم يتذكرون. يعني واحد يسوي هالبشاعة وهالمنظر اللي صار، هسه مستحيل أنساه. أقدر يعني أوصف لك مكان وكل واحد شلون كان شكله. جمعنا بغرفة واحدة، فجأة صارت صوت إطلاق نار، دق الباب. واحد من الجنود شمر فد شيء يعني ما كنت أعرف شنو، إنه أنا صغيرة، بس بعدين عرفت إنه هاي رمانة. شمرها بالغرفة وطبق الباب. صعدنا كلتنا إنه خفنا من عنده، صعدنا على الشرباية ما طقت. خالتي فتحت الباب وشافت إنه بابا من مضروب. من صاحت جاء الجندي ما أعرف إنه متوجه قبل برمي رصاص عشوائي على كل الغرفة. قاعد أختي نور أقول له إنه راحوا، عرفت إنه يعني هي ميتة.
Look around. You didn't shoot in here?
Correct.
Who did?
I remember when we exited the house, Mendoza
being excited that he got to like shoot people or something like that, and he made a statement about if there was anyone else he could shoot or anyone else he could kill.
When we're talking about a forensic reconstruction, the Iraqi versions of events doesn't matter, the Marines' version of events doesn't matter. It's what can we physically determine happened based upon the physical evidence. We have someone firing from the hallway through the doorway of that room, which kills the aunt, and she collapses there. When we look at Tatum and Mendoza's statement, the aunt is ignored, she's not mentioned. So at that point, we know that their statements have at least one portion where they're changing what happened. We have the shooter immediately moving past her body, penetrating into the room, turning at the foot of the bed, and beginning to shoot their way across the bed. At the same time, we have someone coming in behind them, facing the bed from the side and shooting across the head of the bed. On one of the victims, the last to be shot, she actually appears to be simultaneously shot by both shooters at the same time.
We knew that we were going to have to deal with solid evidence that there were two shooters in that room. Our job at that point became somehow proving that one of those shooters was not Staff Sergeant Woodridge.
This demonstration, so it'll be clear on the record when someone reads the transcript. Any objection by counsel to that procedure?
No, sir.
Mr. Floyd, you may continue.
Yes, sir.
I opened, and by then just I had a weapon just kind of like hanging, just with a 3-point sling, and the only thing I just see just women and kids again, and close the doors there.
Okay.
أبدا مو صحيح. هو بالمرة الأولى جاء واحد رمى فتشي هيك أسود، رماه للغرفة وطبق الباب وطلع.
Mendoza places himself at that room, and he places himself opening the door. So against his own self-interest, he places himself as the primary player at that door.
When inside the room, you walked about how many feet into the room? I walked around 8 feet. Okay, went from the door stayed open.
This is the first time I've heard this. Now he's going 8 feet into the room, which is the shooter position. And I've never heard this before today. So if you were to ask me, is this a confession of sorts? What I'd say is Mendoza confessed to everything except for pulling the trigger.
Okay, did you see his hands?
Yes, sir.
He wasn't armed?
No, sir.
But you shot him anyway?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll take the right back.
المعلومة الجديدة إنه ما كنت شايفة هذا اللي قتل والدي أول مرة، يعني كان عرض لي الصورة، ما كنت أعرف منه. يعني هذا الشخص المفروض من ساعة الحادث مستحيل أصلاً يطلع ويشوف الضوء بعد هذا الشيء. هو لازم يتحاسب. يعني على الأقل أخذ له شيء بسيط يعني من حقهم.
We had always known that Lance Corporal Tatum, he admitted in his statement that he positively identified a child before he shot that child.
Lance Corporal Tatum, do you remember telling NCIS, while in house number 2, I did identify some targets as children before I fired my weapon, killing them?
No, I don't remember telling you.
They dismissed the charges, never had a trial, and now suddenly they had Lance Corporal Tatum on their team as well.
We want to present you some evidence, most of which will be presented at the court-martial. This is kind of a trial run. You're a focus group.
We did a mock trial. We presented a case, not like we went in a courtroom, but as close as we possibly could, and they reacted very negatively.
Reduction of rank, bad conduct discharged, and 8 years confinement. I want the dishonorable discharge in 15 years.
House 2 is morally corrupt, and if I thought so, death penalty.
We understood that our client was in jeopardy despite our best case. Frank could be convicted of homicides.
More now on the conclusion to the biggest and longest-running criminal case against U.S. troops.
Sometime into the trial, the main prosecutor, he just kind of pulled me aside, and he said, "Neil, would your guy be willing to take a plea deal?"
I was preparing to testify. I stood up, adjusted my necktie, and started down the hall, and they said, "Stop. We don't need you." And then they reached a plea agreement with Frank Wuterich. If I had taken the stand and testified, I would have said that the best explanation was 2 shooters in that room, Mendoza leading and Tatum firing across the head of the bed. What would have done for the larger concept of justice? Nothing, because both Tatum and Mendoza had been given immunity.
هيصير 20 سنة بدون محاكم. هاي تعتبر هاي جريمة. دي مقطع يعني حرك كل المشاعر اللي في قلبي من قريته. رسالة موجهة إلى قاتل عائلتي. لو كنت أيها القاتل تعلم ما قتلت لما قتلت. لو كنت تعلم أيها الجبان من القتيل ما قتلت. لو دريت أي لوعة لدي تركت أي حسرة أودعت لما قتلت. ولو عرفت معنى فقد الأهل ما أقدمت. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
So you've spent a lot of time with Frank. Do you genuinely believe that he doesn't remember or he doesn't want to remember?
I don't know. I don't know what I believe.
This week, the BBC World Service is launching an exciting new commitment to dial up women's storytelling across our global output. BBC Global Women will share stories throughout the year across BBC News and the BBC World Service, and on television, radio, online and social media every day.
We, as students, are on the right side of the future.
I'm working as a content creator. আমার বাবা যদি আমারে বাসায় আটকায়ও রাখতো, আমি থাকতাম না। আমি যদি শুনতাম যে কোথাও খেলা হচ্ছে, আমি লুকায় চলে যাইতাম।
Mi historia comenzó cuando me di cuenta de que ser mujer no era un problema, más bien era una solución.
हम ग्रीन स्किल्स को पढ़कर अपने कुछ सॉल्यूशन ढूंढे इस चीज के लिए.
When we stand up for the truth, we protect each other, and that's how real change begins.
Here in Iraq, people are really feeling the impact of climate change. Summer temperatures now reach 50 Celsius, far more regularly than they did just 4 decades ago. And when the heat peaks, power cuts often follow, sometimes lasting for days and leaving communities struggling to cope. But even amid these challenges, people are finding innovative ways to adapt. The Kulak Solar Village in the Kurdistan region is the first of its kind in Iraq. Powered 24 hours a day by electricity from solar panels, the project has transformed daily life, especially for local women who are now able to earn a steady income and provide greater security for their families.
بير الزبيب أو برخرنا كده بيواز وقسكو باقلو أبتشتان تور وسرق وأنا سان برا ولا قريتها هتا والزور ببار لو قريه يشو حيوان أسود سياي حيب نبي هم الروجي أتسوين سبيانا ليرة أتسوين سحات حفتة أروشتين عنده شبان كده بانيوان كده لو تأتين عين الروجة بارسلة تسوينه والله هنجن بيرناجي ده والله مزميدان هابون بس كهرباء وانا
مرو مالت ليرة أنا بس أفرت كم يعني بخير يعني كان عندوشن من يارمتي داش خد دم لبزندوشين ومردوشين وطلبشم من بخش يارمتي داش خودم هون شيء دقا كم باب من استدامه بيش مرجع ستار دار مان جزارش محاجده يعني مزبور إنه إيشانه بكين هتاوكو بيجي يعني خو ما فيداكي.
We came to Gulick village because we want to promote sustainability. We want to create communities where they thrive. In this village, we have secured solar panels for all of the houses, the local mosque, the school, and that has meant their lives are completely transformed.
والله بالله كاربانا بوقتي الخوش كاربانا ولا نفرزن باردا وكلن لخو هردان سقل يورك اشتمالي تجي عنا بويا لبكاربا ولا العامش الحمد لله صراحتنا كردي
زورش محزلة مكلي رانش مكتبينيا مكتب هر هتا شاشيا دبي بتسينا هريري بو قرماي همو هاتينو ماري كارباش نبولو خدانيشين بنبرلي.
Our long-term aim is to replicate this throughout villages in Iraq and Kurdistan region. We want to make sure that our countryside stays full of life. We don't want people to leave because they don't have electricity.
وكهرباء العنا والله لو كويس راحتنا بيكردي هاليك بلاشي بيكا مو أكون ربي خوا خير يعني بنوستي ما هذا شنيا أريد لي بيكاين بفرنا هيو تشلو خو تنام زميديني ما تصير كابي
قبل بوستاران زورك ليرانا برون لبا كهربائي بس أو كهربان لما دانا أو يروح يشتينا ما نشاتي نقول ليرانا بس ليش بسيشين ليش ليرانا يعني أو كهربان بس نكلو بزنو مروشي لو أشتو كانا لو أو بلا ورانا صراحة يعني كليا وقر معي مبردين لو دانا يعني كهربان هي
حصارة درزيك حصارة كهربان باش.
Thanks for joining me here in Iraq for this week's episode of Global Eye. And we'd really like your feedback on the programme. So do let us know what you think on social media. You can use the hashtag BBC Global Eye. We'll be back at the same time next week. Goodbye.